a study abroad ambassador for the Office of International Education. I actually went on a trip to the United Kingdom. They offer a J-Mester trip as well as a spring break trip. And this is where I met this lovely man, Mr. Neita, got to know about him. So I recommend all you guys go on that trip. So we saw the impact of the video, 60-year anniversary, which is honestly crazy because I never thought about that because my dad is 67.
Wow.
And so, I mean, obviously he's from Senegal, West Africa, so he didn't necessarily like experience that,
Right.
but it's just crazy because it's only one generation apart, you know. So
Yes.
we all have to realize that. But when I went to the UK, what I noticed is that the tone around the conversation of Black identity and the African diaspora is very different from the U.S. and as it pertains to African Americans as well. So how do you see the difference, either differing from or mirroring the experiences of African Americans to like Black Brits and Brits of the African diaspora?
Okay, well, there's so much. there's so much similarities, and there's so much that we share in common, but what I would say from my own perspective and my own observation, because I've spent time in both countries, more in the UK than here, is that the Black diaspora here in the UK, in the United States, feels more settled as far as identity is concerned. There's been a journey, as far as I can understand it. There is a journey which has landed up right now to the term African Americans as a term that describes us all, and that we are comfortable right there. Also equally Black people in America, right? But we've had other terms being used and terms we have used to define ourselves. That still remains in acronyms, but there has been a journey and it's landed, and it feels to me like, yes, there might be groups of people who feel like this is not home and that home is elsewhere. Usually when we think of home being elsewhere, we think of the motherland, our continent, our motherland continent, Africa. But for the most part, I experience African Americans as this is my state, this is my home, this is my land. I've been here for generations. Not so in UK, it's slightly different. And though we have Black people who have been there for generations, and if we want to go right back to the founding of the United Kingdom, the first emperor during Roman's time was an African by the name of Septimus Severus. And there's almost, thank you, my brother. And there's almost an unbroken chain, really, of Black people throughout society. And one of the things that happened to us in England is that we were, for want of a better word, in the past, bred out. Okay, so then there was a hue and cry by the monarchy during the 18th century around there are too many Black people here, we're going to send them back. And Black people are not going anywhere. We remain there, we're resilient. This is our home. And in a way, what tended to happen was that there's a lot of intermarriage. So if you think interracial dating or marriage is a deal here, and I learned on the trip about the outlaw, the unlawful, let's just call it odious laws, making that illegal. In Britain, that was just commonplace, right? And so it doesn't take long for a child to start looking like a white person. We want to reflect now on the term passing. And in Britain, it's not so much passing as you can't tell. You really can't tell. Now, coming to your point about identity. So a number of Black people in Britain now, which is the subject of one of my plays, Windrush, came across during that Windrush period, that generation that came post-war. England, though victorious in the war, was destroyed and needed to be rebuilt. An invitation sent out to people from the Caribbean, to what they call the Commonwealth, Africa, everywhere, Please come and help us rebuild. Those people now who came over and were treated very badly when they got there, met with racism, discrimination, signs that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, those kind of signs. You began to wonder, because of the treatment in society, people took on, the next generation, I would say, took on this kind of thinking like, this is not my home. I'm certainly not treated like it's my home. So there might be an expression like, I want to go home. And where's home? The Caribbean. Where's home? Africa. Right? And yet there's this sense of not really owning this place, which the power structures were all too happy to hear. Your age group now in Britain, I believe, would be different. They would have the same thinking of what I believe to be the majority of African Americans, that, guess what? This is my country. Blood, sweat, and tears is here. It's not perfect, but this is my country. But there's a whole generation of people in the UK which might argue, they don't treat me like I'm at home, so this can't be my home. And when they go home, like visit the Caribbean, they might say, well, English, you're called, you would never hear the English call a black person English. In fact, it is said that you can't be English if you're black. You're British. So you'll hear a lot of black people in Britain saying, I'm black British. They don't say I'm black English. You never hear a black person. Hardly ever you'll hear a black person defining themselves as English, because they don't feel that they can be English. English is to be white. Yet when they go to, if their parents say, you're going to go to the Caribbean and study because I don't like what's happening here, guess what they're called as their nickname? English. What's up, English? What go on, English? In a kind of a sweet way, not in a kind of a derogatory way. So that identity is mixed up. If I'm not English here, but they call me English over there, and I'm not really Jamaican there, and when I go to Africa, I don't even know what's going on, and so on, where is home? Where I believe, and you might have to put me right, it is settled in my mind. When I look at, you have to just accept me as an outsider looking in. When I look at the African American, I see the African American say, this is my home, which is an attitude I'd like to encourage more in my place of residence right now in the UK, that this is our home. And where did we ever get the idea that home needs to be perfect? Homes by their very nature have some dysfunction in them anyway. So why should a nation be perfect? It doesn't need to be perfect for us to call it home, because our blood, sweat, and tears have been there. So it's an ongoing conversation. Very good question, an ongoing conversation, because identity continues to be defined and redefined.
So I just have a quick follow-up for that, actually, from hearing your speech. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
But because you started off by saying that because African Americans have such a solid foundation of belief that this is their home,
yes,
do you think that makes it easier to be a black Brit? Because obviously these black Brits are like, okay, this isn't our home, but every black Brit is saying that, right? So within that, like, oppression, isn't there kind of a unity within that? Because, like, from my experience personally, like, I'm a first generation American, right?
Yeah.
But, like, I feel way more comfortable saying, like, I'm Senegalese than American, you know? Because, like you said, there's a solid foundation of what it is to be African American here. And even, you know, growing up in, like, Harlem, like, I grew up in Little Africa, like, I'm just Senegalese there. And here, like, it's a complete difference. Like, I'm not African American here, you know? But, like, it's a... So I'm just wondering, like, does that make it easier to be a black Brit than it is to be African American?
I'm not sure. You know, you open up some very interesting points, and it's such a look. You could do a whole study on this. You could do a whole study on this because, and you have to do a kind of a longitudinal study, because if you ask that question 30 years ago, there was some unity. Most black people would be saying a phrase like, me born here, but me not on here. I was born here, but this is not for me, right? Not true, no. Blacks are not united in that thought, no, because you have the youngsters your age who they're British. And what was powerful, you have your Edwin Moses here. We had our black athletes in Britain who would run and win races for Britain in Olympics and wrap the British flag around them and claim Britishness, which I think is a good thing. Remember, the thing is this. You're born in a... Imagine Imagine right now in a hospital somewhere in London, 2 babies are born right at this very moment, one white, one black. And the white will grow up thinking, this is my country, I can vote, I can run for office, I can do anything, I can reach any place, this is my place. And the black youth made to think, this is not really my place. This is not really my place. And this is the psyche that is developing right here in America. I might not really be American. I might be born here but don't have a natural right here. And any force of oppression would love this to be the thinking. My suggestion is that those who think this is their land, they're born here and have a birthright and entitled to everything here, from running for office to voting to doing anything and achieving anything, that's the right way of thinking. And if you're invited not to feel so comfortable, the invitation itself is toxic and comes from a very, I would say, an evil place, be it in America or in Britain. And this is the constant struggle, the struggle for home and identity. What is home? Where is home? What is my identity? And that is a true struggle. So the highest ranking black male in politics in Britain is a man by the name of David Lammy. Yeah. And he was the foreign secretary and now the justice secretary. And he asked the question, why can't I be black and English? And he's the highest ranking man. He's an officer of the crown. And he's asking the question, why can't I be black and English? So the question continues, and it's still an issue. And but I do think you have to decide at some point what your identity needs to be. No, the other thing is this. Two things can be true at the same time, you know. Africa can be home and is home and will always be home. But this can be home too. It can be the Caribbean. Those of you who have Caribbean connection, you can say, that my heart is there, my people's heart is there, but this is home too. In other words, what you end up becoming a global citizen and taking territory wherever you are. I was taken on a tour today, well done by Freddie, and I saw a word, I didn't even know what the meaning of the word was. I first saw the word yesterday in the chapel. I need to put it in my memory right now. And I said, what is the meaning of that word? And he looked it up. He was able to tell me. Taking possession of the land. It's how far are you away from your origins? Yeah. And your generations, you're hundreds of years far. And we're just the other day. We came up. And I feel like the African American feel like many Caribbeans feel. A lot of, I'm in the process of trying to get a flight from the Caribbean to Africa. And a lot of people in my own country say, who is interested in that? Nobody wants to go to Africa. This is home. Jamaica is home. Fine, okay. But Africa is also our origins and our home. And there ought to be a curiosity around that, right? So we say, well, you know, with more, look at all our flight routes. The Caribbean, our flight routes are here. They easily come here or to the UK, but not to each other. You find it very difficult to fly between the islands, but easy to fly here. And what if you can't get a visa? The freedom of movement. And that's the other thing about identity. Identity is also about, the world has been divided into class of citizenship. An American visa, an American passport allows you, the world is yours. Your oyster, you can go anywhere you want. Same with the UK visa. So we in the Caribbean would be saying to our black brothers and sisters in the UK, why are you complaining about not being British? You should embrace it because it allows you freedom of movement. And the whole of our history is about going in the opposite direction of our freedom of movement. I was impressed with the museum that we visited on Saturday, right? The EJI initiative. It's not called a Black Experience Museum, you know. It's so stark. It almost is like you wouldn't want to go in a museum like that. You have a museum of a black experience. You go to a museum of black experience on the mall, right? Smithsonian. What are you going to find? Everything from enslavement to empowerment. But this guy insists on saying enslavement to incarceration. What kind of museum is that? Except to give you the stark reality of where we are, which is to say that Caribbean folk can't travel too far, right? And America was never meant for us to have this you know, this privilege sitting here in this Hall of Fame with all these people looking down on us. In an English equivalent, it would be all white men looking down on us. Okay? Yet you've created this sanctuary space. This is an exception to the direction of travel. We've broken, this is a symbol of breaking the chains. And our brother Brian Stevenson is reminding us of the blueprint for black life is to be either enslaved or incarcerated. And so therefore the question of identity becomes a burden, because when you're an American, you hold a passport and you hold a stick, and it's being eroded right now. And in Britain, what happened? I can tell you about it. I wrote a play about it, the Windrush generation. They were denied social services, deported, and saying you're not British, the very people who worked to build that country. So all those freedoms can be rolled back, and that's why identity is important. And that as much as we might want to claim African identity, which we can absolutely do, and Caribbean identity, we need to claim the identity of these nations we live in. The term, as I was telling you, was, and after learning this, says a trip off our tongue. Part of what we've lost is the tripping off of our tongue, our language. I'm sure this might be Greek.
Which one?
Oikomene.
Oikomene.
Somebody know it better than me. Oikomene. And my brethren tell me it means inhabited land. We inhabit this place. And we hear in our Gospels, the Lord inhabit our praise. We inhabit this place. We have to inhabit. We have to take territory. That's for me where I'm at with it, my brother Mouhamadou. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. All right.
No, I hear you, and I'm going to try and connect this to my next question, but one of the main points that I wanted to grapple on is, obviously, like you said, there are two boys being born in Britain, like right this second.
Yes.
There's a white boy who's going to be taught that, like, the world is his oyster.
Yes.
And there's a black boy who won't have the same privilege, right? And I think the main difference that I see within the UK and the US is that the US has this propaganda of the American dream, right?
Yes.
So we're not supposed to, or the white man in America is not supposed to tell you can't do this. Like, the American dream is supposed to fill in the gaps of that, the former invalidation that took place over decades and centuries of black people all the way up to the Civil Rights Act. So I think the main difference is that the UK doesn't really have their American dream to my knowledge. And so to connect this to my next question, going back to when I was in the UK, we went to a school where there were students from years 8 to 10, and we had a debate with them about whether or not the US or the UK was better. And one consistent theme that showed up was the idea of soft power. So mediums like media, film, literature, education, like those mediums in that area. So how do you see the global influence of the US and the UK taking place today in terms of those mediums, especially since you're a poet as well?
Yeah, and thank you for the way you phrase it, because you're right, we don't have an equivalent dream. We don't, like you said, the American dream. Who is it for? Well, it's for Americans. And are we Americans? Yeah, we are Americans, so it's for us too. And it's what Dr. King was saying, we came here to cash a check. If we're human beings, if we're not human beings, then we can have a conversation. But if we're human beings and we're Americans, then we're here to cash a check. We're equal under the law, right? And Britain haven't really created that sense of there's a British dream equivalent that applies to everybody, right? So the first observation is actually absolutely spot on, and we need to create that. Outside of that, though, when you're talking about the comparisons, we have a lot in common. We have a lot that's similar. Our pain is very similar, right? So I hope that those of you who have visited London can now talk about London and listen, there are black people there. A lot of people in the UK don't think that black people live there, right? Okay, and that we're not too far apart. That if you go to the city, if you go to Harlem, and you go to Harlem in New York, and you go to Brixton in London, you're looking at some similarities. Not the same, but you're looking at some similarities. Even the journey, even the same process of gentrification. Remember I tell you now, it's not even like accident. We both had a significant moment in 1965. Civil Rights Act, Race Relations Act, right? All right, let's look at some negatives that we have. You know, you have Breonna Taylor, right? I can give you a name. For every name you give me, I can give you a name. So Breonna Taylor, or we have Joy Gardner. You have George Floyd movement, we have Christopher Alder, right? If you look up those cases, what you'll see is that a whole area of law has been built in Britain on civil rights action against the police, based on police brutality to black people in Britain. And so we share that. But we also share forming groups and societies and organizations that are taking us further and taking us farther. And actually, there's been a lot of collaboration between Britain and America going forward. And as you said, with social media now, we can reach each other. I am here today because of a visit you made. Dr. Young, Dr. Adams, and others have come over, and we've made this connection. It is really a testimony, it's really a testament of collaboration that I'm here today, right? That there can be an exchange in terms of you're coming, we're coming here, we can impact each other, we can empower each other. So I believe that given the world we live in now and the swiftness of communication and getting beyond some of that which divides us and working together, we can empower both our nations and begin to really solidify this whole idea that it's our home. These places are our home. And our forebearers have built these places, and that we need to occupy these places and play a role in these places. And also that they're not perfect. They're not perfect. And part of the imperfection is that we think, this doesn't feel like home and it's not perfect. I'd like to find a home. But let me tell you, when you come to the Caribbean, it's not perfect either. And when you go to Africa, it's not perfect either. So I'll tell you something right now. If you're looking for a place where you're not discriminated against, don't come to the Caribbean. Don't come to the Caribbean, because I can tell you now, and I'm ashamed to tell you, that the discrimination you face in America will be the discrimination you'll face in the tourist area. Same way. On color alone. On color, on skin color alone. And I'm ashamed that we are like that. Not to mention, I won't even bother to go into intra-racism, which colonialism has taught us to divide each other.
Like colorism?
Like colorism, yeah? So we have those issues. And if you think you're not going to face it in Africa, actually, I went to Ghana and I never had one instance of that. But I spoke to my Ghanaian friend and she said, you just wasn't there long enough. Right? But in every single African nation I've been in, I have found discrimination against my black self in favor of a white person. So this home that we might think is some paradise doesn't really exist. You know what exists? The struggle we have where we live. And to make that an oasis and a place. And to stay and fight where we are. Because there's no place to escape to. Yes, Garvey had a great dream. 7 miles of Black Carolina, repatriation to Africa. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should go and bring skills and build. But we're not going to a perfect place. We do not have a black paradise. A black paradise is what we make right here where we live, wherever we live, whether it's the UK or the USA. And I think now with the power to collaborate, we can do even greater things, which I think is something important.
Right. Totally agree with you. For my next question, as both a poet and a lawyer, how do you see poetry and just both art and language as a tool to advance global rights, especially as it pertains to marginalized communities? Because if you think about it, like for us black people, both in the UK and the US, like the system wasn't made for us, both the legal and political system.
Yeah, poetry is very powerful, and it makes me wonder why. All right, I won't do it. I was going to ask if anybody know. I was going to ask you. Let me just ask it same way. Let me just ask you. I didn't know. Paul Lawrence Dunbar. If you know him, do you know his name? Paul Lawrence Dunbar. Raise your hand, please. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, right? Okay, so that's a kind of a minority of the audience, right? That's a minority of the audience. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, one of the most brilliant writers, right? Makes Shakespeare look like a choir boy, really. Come from a place called Ohio. Died in his early 30s in 1906. Just read his poetry and his books. They are works of art. They're compositions of art, right? But why is it that we don't hear more Paul Lawrence Dunbar? It's stifled somehow, right? But if you think about your illustrious people in art, Maya Angelou might comes to mind, right? Yeah. You think Maya Angelou just inspired African Americans?
No, not just that.
All of the world, you just mentioned Maya Angelou, and everybody's like, wow, 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 you know? And has empowered people, right? Through word. And what does Maya use? What's her tool? Words. She used words and her delivery as well. So I say, work on your words and work on your delivery. I give a poem on this. I give a little poem on this. I wrote a poem called Why Read? And it goes like this. There are those who have and those who need. There are those who follow and those who lead. The common thread that runs through those who lead, no matter what their race, gender, religion, or creed, they all cultivate a healthy greed to read. So let us choose to lead. And on words, let us feed. And let us also write for others to read. Agreed? I hope we can agree. So it brings me back to the point. Reading is important. When I say reading, I don't just mean book. I mean art. We should be reading art. When I say read, I mean looking at the picture. Reading politics, reading weather, reading people. Reading the people around you. How you become a good friend, my brother? Because you read your friends, don't you? You know when somebody's down. You know when to back off. You know when they need a hand support. It's all reading. It's all reading. But the last line of the poem I write, we should also write for others to read. So the young man who gave me a tour today, Freddie, I give him a name check still, right? Because he told me he wrote a book and it's online. And many of you are writing. You see, this is why this college, they give you a term here. I hear Dr. Young do it all the time. Do your documentary. You're all documentarian. Do it. We're going to take it to a place. I want you to annotate it. I want you to write up about it and present it. What I think that is doing is that not one of your professors have the ability to have the full view of the world and the vision of where we need to go. But together we do. So I want to hear from you. How I'm going to hear from you? Orally, we're good at that. Storytell. We talk a lot, which is good. And we have a strong oral tradition. What I feel we need to do is write and put it down on paper, put it in script, put it in poem, write it in a book, as some of your students have done here, put it in a play, and so on. And that's why scholarship is about writing and putting your name to things and taking ownership of your writing and your material. I think your question is very important. To create our artwork, put it out there, making your films, which you can quote and so on. That's so important. You know, Spike has done it as a whole canon of films out there, right? And you can have the same canon. They can be short, they can be long. It's just so important. Yeah. So, you know, art is very important for spreading that.
Yeah. All right, thank you for your answer. And my last question for the sake of time. Obviously, we talked about marginalized groups and whatnot and how black people are marginalized. And as a lawyer, you know, I think a lot about what's going on in the world and like certain structures and institutions for justice, like the International Criminal Court, yes. You know? And I think about how they've never indicted a Western yes. white presenting leader, you know? Yeah. The closest they got was Augusto Pinochet, the Chilean dictator. Yes. And, but that's like, we consider South America the global South, you know? So they've indicted so many black leaders, so many Middle Eastern leaders, Asian leaders, but they've never inducted like a white leader, right? And so even when you look at it from the top to the bottom, right, we see these black people, even in positions of power, like they're being discriminated against, you know? Mm-hmm. So as a lawyer, how do you see the US and UK going about global reform when it comes to the political system and legal system?
Yeah, I think the UK and the US will not really undertake that. I mean, it's all about, it all comes down to leadership. And almost written within the code, in the constitution that governs all of us, there is inequality built into it. There's inequality. And the whole idea about inequality is to get you used to it. And so I think great nations, big nations and powerful nations will not disturb that status quo. It's going to take people and organizations, small people and organizations. So remember, like, if we come back to this, where we started about what happened in the 60s in both our countries. It wasn't governments that did it. It wasn't governments at all, although they might try to take credit for it later, right? So I think the system would love us to think, okay, Abraham Lincoln's freed the slaves. And in Britain, they'd love us to think William Wilberforce freed the slaves. But that's not true. What happened is that enslaved Africans liberated themselves by how we reacted from the very first start, from literally throwing ourselves overboard and preferring death to slavery. Is an act of resistance, right? To revolts, to resistance. And you hear about many people, but what they would like to leave in your mind is that the powerful forces, we did it. Not true. It's always small groups of people and organizations. You know, there's nothing to suggest that Jim Crow would change or that segregation in America would change. Remember the governor from down south talked about segregation today.
George Wallace.
Yeah. Segregation yesterday, today, and forever, right? There's always this thing. It has to be interrupted. And those with the most power are not necessarily those who are going to interrupt injustice. The people who interrupt injustice are the people who are feeling it most, fed up of it, and decide no more. And then they take action, and then they organize, and they make it happen. Haiti is a good example. Saint-Domingue, the French had control of Haiti, and the revolution was led by Toussaint Louverture, who organized, got people together, and said, no more of this, and we're going to overthrow this order. There's nothing to... Why would France ever stop that when the whole of France is built on Haiti? The whole of Bordeaux, when you think of it, you're drinking a Bordeaux wine. The whole of that region was built on Haiti. Saint-Domingue at the time. There's no reason to stop it. It's not like people are saying, let's do the right thing now. It's that enslaved Africans made it dangerous to engage in this activity. So what do we then do? We pivot, and we don't move to freedom or liberation. We move to, as was said in the museum, is an evolution of oppression. What can we do next? The appearance of freedom. So there's a freedom, but how can you have freedom without reparation? And in 2015, reparation checks were still being made to white owners, the descendants of white plantation owners, and nothing about those who experienced it. So everything that has been established by black people, for us, by us, all that stuff, is what is needed. It's for us to organize, come together, and build on our successes, because they can be erased. What I've learned, I think I was foolhardy one time in thinking that when you make progress in terms of humanity, that you can only build on that progress. You reach a certain level, you will never go back, you'll go forward. And what we see now is that, in fact, when George Floyd happened, I thought that's it. We're going to have an accelerated growth in humanity, equality, and all of that. I literally was duped into thinking that. Not duped, I just thought that this was a moment. And the reason I thought it was a moment is because normally events are local. Something happened in America, it happens in America. In Britain, but this affected the globe. And yet we're seeing rollbacks in progress now that I never thought possible. What it means is that every time we make progress, we have to make sure that we can never go back and that we build on that and continue to build on that. And one of the ways to do that is international collaborations like we're doing here. Travel as much as you can, learn as much as you can, work with each other, continue to build our community, continue to lend a helping hand. You come to a place like Morehouse, you're always going to have more than you need. And the reason is because you're getting a top level education, so you're going to do well. When you have more than you need, you can join forces with your excess. When your cup is full and flowing over, you need a saucer underneath it to catch some of your blessings, and that blessings can spread to build up your community. And that's what we need to do. Continue to find ways to build up our community. Through our arts, through our science, through everything that we're doing, all the disciplines we're learning, we have to use that and ensure that we build our community. Thank you, Dr.